there's boiling water and you're a frog and someone throws you in, you're going to be like, I'm getting out of here. I'm not going to get involved with this. But that's not how abuse happens. It's like that the frog is in the pot and the water is cool and it slowly increases and it increases. And then you don't even realize how bad it is.
Yeah, the frog thinks it's in a hot tub.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's become so normal that when you, at the end, it's like, how did I ever allow this to happen?
You're listening to the Nacho Kids podcast, where we discuss all things step-family related. Real stories, real people, real help. Your hosts are the creators of the Nacho Kids Method and the Nacho Kids Academy step-family coaching team, Lori and David Sims.
Welcome to episode 261 of the Nacho Kids podcast. It's just me today, folks. David is busy, so I told him that I would do this all by myself. Our guest today is Lisa Johnson. Lisa and her partner, Chris Berry, are the authors of Been There, Got Out: Toxic Relationships, High Conflict Divorce, and How to Stay Sane Under Insane Circumstances. That's all I'm going to tell you, so let's get to listening. Today we have Lisa Johnson. Hey, Lisa Johnson, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
And you are the author of Been There, Got Out.
Yep.
Yeah, me too.
You're not the author.
That's a chapter in my book of life.
So tell us a little bit about you, how you came about writing the book and all that good stuff.
Okay. So Been There, Got Out. But Been There, Got Out is actually the name of my business with my partner, like you, with your life partner. So I always say I'm the female half of Been There, Got Out, and I'm a state certified domestic violence advocate. My partner, Chris, is the male half. He's a certified high conflict divorce coach. And like I said, we're a couple in real life for 9 years. And together, based on our personal experience and then some, we help people getting out of toxic relationships, dealing with high conflict divorce, separations, custody battles more than anything, and co-parenting hell, so that they have the chance of the best outcome in family court and beyond. And so our clients are all dealing with some type of very difficult ex who is often weaponizing the legal system to wear them down and bleed them dry financially. And that has been my experience in court for the last 10 years, and my partners on and off in court for also a little about that amount of time.
We often have people tell us, where were you 10 years ago? I wish I'd have found you 10 years ago. Well, I'm going to ask you, where were you 20 years ago?
20 years ago.
She was probably in school.
Yeah, I know. I thought I was still happily married and I had a 4-year-old and a baby.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, 20 years ago, I realized how high conflict my ex was. So I have been in the family court system off and on for, 19 years. Jackson turned 19. So, done. Thank you, Jesus. And I could talk about the family court system all day long, and not in a good way, because even from a winning standpoint, it's messed up. And so it's really important that people like you are helping others to realize how you deal with these douchebags. Number one, talking about your ex, and how to.
All right.
He's got to be a douchebag.
They're very similar. A lot of them are very similar.
And how to deal with these people, because a lot of the times we get emotionally enraged, and then you've got the court stuff that adds stress, whether it's the finances. So let's start with recognizing signs of someone being narcissistic or signs of a toxic relationship.
Like while you're in it, I think 1 out of 2 people in an abusive relationship don't even realize that they're in it, because our culture seems to think that domestic violence is really physical, but there are so many other types of what we call invisible abuse. And one of the things that's part of my background is I gave live testimony for something called Jennifer's Law, which passed and made Connecticut the 3rd state to expand its legal definition of domestic violence to include something called coercive control. So all that invisible abuse, emotional abuse, verbal, revenge porn, sexual abuse, legal abuse, financial abuse, stalking. Now that has to be considered when looking at safety issues like restraining orders and custody. But most people still seem to think that abuse is physical.
Mhm.
And hopefully laws like this will now start educating people that sometimes physical makes it easier for people to understand. And that's why all that invisible abuse is worse, because people think it's not as serious. But once you can get out of the relationship, you still have that person's voice in your head and all the trauma, and that can last for years and years. And especially as they're dragging you through the court system. I mean, that's a whole other, that's our specialty, legal abuse. But in terms of recognizing toxic, it's I think a lot of it is first learning about understanding that there's abuse besides physical.
Mhm.
I mean, we have a domestic violence center in my town. I never, ever imagined contacting them while I was in my 20-year relationship, because most of the time there was nothing physical. In my head, I thought, oh, that's for battered women. And it was only a year and 9 months after my ex was out of the house when my neighbor said, your ex is like parked outside our dead end street. And I thought, oh, well, that's weird, but there's probably no danger. And then another neighbor who is a police officer said, actually, that shows an extraordinary amount of danger, because if it's been a year and 9 months, he lives in another state, he works in a different state, and he's not seeing the kids, why is he parked outside your house?
Yeah.
We need to get a police report filed. We need to do what's called a lethal assessment screening. And then we need to get you in touch with the domestic violence center. And so someone from the police came over, they did this lethal assessment screening, and they're like, you are actually in severe danger because of some of these situations and some of the things that had happened in the past, but especially because so much time had gone by. Why is this person still haunting us?
Right.
And so that's what put me in touch with the domestic violence center, and it blew my world wide open in terms of what I had been experiencing, but not even realizing it.
Right.
But so recognizing toxic is really hard if you're not schooled in basically what emotional abuse looks like.
Mhm.
And often we get in these relationships, the cycle where the person meets and they're love bombing you, and it's like love at first sight, and it feels like they totally get you, and it's just so amazing. And then they suck you in and they start gradually devaluing you. And you're thinking, what did I do? Why did whatever I do, now everything's wrong? And I want to try to get back to that initial honeymoon phase, and it doesn't work. And then as the relationship keeps disintegrating, then there's the discard, where either they do something that shows that they're done with you, or they just leave. And you're like, what happened? And the whole time you're blaming yourself and thinking, I just have to do better. Like everything's my fault. And maybe I'm the toxic one. So I think for me, if I had understood more about what domestic violence was, I could have recognized it and maybe done something sooner.
Mhm.
But this affects, like I said, people in abusive relationships, 1 in 2 of them don't even know it. But domestic violence affects 1 in 3 women and 1 in 5 to 7 men during their lifetimes.
I've been in a relationship before where I would talk to the person about something that concerned me. So, for instance, they traveled out of town during the week. And of course, I'm there with all the responsibilities. They wouldn't call one day. The next day when they called, of course, I would make the statement of, well, why didn't you call yesterday? I mean, not like, why didn't you call me? Not hateful, but just, why didn't you call yesterday? Or did something happen? And before I knew it, after we got off the phone, it got turned around that I was wrong for caring. It flabbergasted me. I would, honest to goodness, hang up the phone and go, how did that just happen? How did my mind just whoop? And then also, I was in a relationship that had domestic violence. So I did not see it coming. But once it happened, my reaction was complete opposite of what I thought it would be. My mentality was, you lay a hand on me, you go into jail, and I'm done. Oh, no. That's not what happened. First of all, I had hit back So there was a mark. So the cop was going to arrest both of us. Lori not going to jail. Lori not going to jail. So that was off the table. Like, no, okay, never mind. I'm not pressing charges, which is interesting because this was after like the stuff with OJ Simpson and all that, where the woman or the person that was beaten should not have to file charges. The state does. But anyway, apparently this cop didn't know that or didn't care. And so when they said, well, if you press charges, you'll go to jail too because he has a mark on him, I'm like, no, no, no. So forget all that. But I kicked into what I'm going to call battered women syndrome because I don't know any other term for it, but I just wanted everything to be okay. I wanted it to not have happened. I felt like it was all my fault. I didn't know what to do to make it better. I thought it could just kind of be swept under the rug. We did stay together, but I never felt safe in that relationship. I walked on eggshells after that. But I also found it interesting that we lived together and I would get stuff about abuse workshops or whatever. They sent it to the house. Why would you send that to the house? Because he's here too. And when he gets the mail, that's not good. So I say all that saying that I even think that the abuse is, even when you hang up the phone and go, how did they change my mind about this? That's like some kind of narcissistic power, superpower somebody has. And then the physical abuse, even when it happens, you don't necessarily kick into, you've got to go. It's, how did that happen? Let's make things right. Just what can I do to make it better kind of thing. It was just really surprising that that's how I reacted because I never in a million years thought I would react that way.
Well, we often talk about this image. I'm sure you've heard it of the frog in the pot.
Yep.
How, if there's boiling water and you're a frog and someone throws you in, you're going to be like, I'm getting out of here. I'm not going to get involved with this. But that's not how abuse happens. It's like that the frog is in the pot and the water is cool and it slowly increases and it increases. And then you don't even realize how bad it is.
Yeah, the frog thinks it's in a hot tub.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's become so normal that when you, at the end, it's like, how did I ever allow this to happen? I remember at one point at the very end, I was with my ex for 20 years. And there were 2 years between when I knew the relationship was done, even though I was still trying therapy and everything to do to keep this family together instead of being like, this is awful. Like, I don't even know why I want to stay. But my brain was like, I want to keep the family together. And he did get physically violent. And I remember saying to him, if this ever happens, this can never happen again. Like, this is it. But it happened a couple more times beforehand. And it was like, I kept thinking, what did I do wrong? And he would say, you made this happen. So even though he's ripping out my hair, he'd say, if you hadn't yelled in my face, I'm thinking, but I wasn't yelling in your face. I was asking you a question, but he was so agitated that he just lashed out. Right. And there's always emotional abuse before physical violence. It's never just physical violence. There's always things that lead up to it. And that's why it's so important to have a safety plan when you do decide to go, because the power dynamic is changing. And when people get out of these relationships, the other side has lost that dominance over you. Mm-hmm. And so they'll do anything sometimes to get it back.
I remember I had a friend of mine that I had called her when this happened and we were talking and she started looking up numbers like for places for me to call. Well, I mean, I could have went and lived with my dad or a friend. It's not like I was going to be homeless. But she told me, she said, if you go back to him, don't ever call me when he does it again. She said, I'm here to help you, and you going back is not helping you. And I'm thinking, what kind of friend are you? But she was the good friend that was saying, look, this is serious. You need to not go back. And if you do, don't come whining to me when he kicks your butt.
Yeah, that's really tricky. I mean, there's so much shame associated with domestic violence. And I know with many of our clients, most of our clients are highly educated, very successful professional people. And so they feel like they can't talk about it with other people because when they try, their friends and family will say, how could you have been so stupid?
Right.
Like, you of all people, I would think that you would have known better. Right. And it's making them they're already feeling isolated and now they feel so much worse and less likely to reach out for help. Mm-hmm. We've had a client in the past. She was a top New York City corporate attorney, like total, like went to Columbia Law School, very, very successful in her career. And she was living with someone. She had a baby and a toddler. He used to lock them in the basement. He had boarded up the windows and would unscrew the light bulbs and had them trapped down there. So she would get out, go to work, and come back and deal with this. Like, how is someone like that supposed to tell anybody?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And then other people were thinking, how could she not tell somebody? Why would she live that way? Why would she go to work? It's not like she was captive 24/7 to where she couldn't reach out to somebody. Why did she go to work and not tell anybody to get help?
Right. And there's also all the trauma bonding where, you keep thinking, maybe I could make it better. Like, this person didn't used to be this way. If I do this, like you said, walk on eggshells, if I dance around and then I can make it better. And it's not going to be so bad. It's so complex.
Right. And then you do blame yourself, especially when they say, you made me do this. Because when you said that, I was like, yep, I heard the same thing. You made me do it. No, I didn't make you do it.
Right. And I can't even count how many times we've met with people who have said, well, maybe I'm the toxic one. Maybe I'm the narcissist. Do you think I am? And I'm like, the fact that you're asking means it's probably not, because someone with that kind of personality disorder is not usually capable of self-reflection. And this makes me think of during those 2 years when I knew my marriage was over and it was like planning my exit, my ex used to hold my hands and say it with me. Say it, Lisa. Say, I'm an abuser. I'm an abuser. And I'm like, I'm not an abuser. And he'd be like, no, you are. Say it. And I was like, I don't think so. And then later I look back thinking, why was he trying to record me? I'm sure he was trying to record me to say something like that, to use against me in court. Who knows? But it was really weird.
That is really weird.
Yeah. There's a lot of really weird in the past.
Yeah.
we get the greatest stories. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do people typically come to you? Is it court ordered, or do they find you a different way?
Yeah, no, people are never court ordered to find us. So we're basically high conflict divorce strategists. So people find us at different times. If they're still in the relationship, which is rare when they find us, because usually people still in the relationship haven't educated themselves as much as the rest of our community. But we call them our babies, and they're usually terrified and overwhelmed and like, I don't know what to do. I'm at the very beginning. I haven't even picked a lawyer yet. And so we often say to them, even though you feel this way now and you're so scared, you have more power than you will ever have again, because you haven't made any of the expensive mistakes yet. Most people find us while they're in the middle of a divorce or post-judgment, and they've had like terrible orders made against them, or they're just like, I have been spending $60,000 and it's been a year and a half and nothing's happened and I can't understand why. And we keep approaching my ex and we keep getting really close to settlement and nothing's happening. Like, I don't know what to do. And so that's like our sweet spot. And then there's a number who come, like I said, post-judgment, where they're just like, my ex is taking me back to court, or I need to take my ex back to court and I have to figure out how to win this motion. And so depending on how they find us, that's where we step in. But we only work with one side. We don't work with couples ever. And we basically help let's say, usually we call it the victim or the target parent, figure out how to work with an ex who's really, really complicated. Usually their ex either has some kind of personality disorder, and we don't diagnose because it doesn't matter, but they're very predictable, and or some kind of addiction. And so Chris and I say that we often fill the gap between what lawyers are not trained to do and therapists don't understand. So lawyers are trained in logic. They think that when it's, let's say it's a divorce and you're trying to mediate, negotiate, that both people are coming to the table with the idea that they're going to do what's fair and what's best for the children. That is not the case with our clients' exes or our exes. They don't care about what's fair and what's best for the kids. They care about only what's best for themselves. And so to approach with logic ends up costing tons of money and time and energy, and everyone gets frustrated. And even the lawyers themselves get frustrated because they're like, I can't figure this case out. And we often say that all of our clients belong to the club of, my lawyer says this is the craziest case they've ever had. Because they just don't understand it. And then we have therapists, many of whom don't understand narcissistic or emotional abuse. They don't understand, the difference unless they're trauma informed or they've been especially trained. But they also don't understand the impact of the trauma caused by going through the legal system and thereafter with a really difficult, abusive ex. And the fact that it can take years and cost tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. And it goes on and on and on. And you're always living with this sense of dread of like, if I'm not perfect, I'm going to get in trouble. If I don't do what this other person wants, I'm going to get in trouble. It's like living with a terrorist, and it consumes our lives.
Yes.
And so what Chris and I help do partially, with our clients, and also we have a legal abuse support group, is we help turn the volume down and turn it into background static. And often when I meet someone for the first time, they'll be like, oh my God, you've been doing it for 10 years. Like, I can't do that. I'm like, I didn't choose to do it, but there's really no choice. I mean, because giving up or giving in doesn't make it stop, because these people always want more. So in this process, I've learned to manage it. I've had tremendous support, and that's what we share with our clients too. But during this time, I've also met the love of my life. I've had tons of amazing triumphs in and out of court. My kids are thriving and doing really well, despite my horror that they were going to be destroyed by this experience. And we have this amazing community, plus, my triumphs in court at the family court level and the appellate court level. I think I told you my case is published in the Connecticut Law Journal. So it's legal precedent for the state, and I'm not even an attorney. Like, these are things that we can't even imagine. And so having a career like this is so rewarding, because we often hear stories from our clients about like, oh my God, I can't believe it. I just won this, or this just happened. And it's really not winning, like who really wins. But what I love seeing is that power dynamic turnaround, the tables turn, justice is served, often after a very long time and a lot of effort. But we see it happen, and it's like, oh, yes, you just have to stick with it and obviously get a lot of support along the way. I mean, you're what I would call a grizzled veteran like me. You've been doing it for a long time. And so I'm sure it wasn't you just completely by yourself. You need others to help guide you through it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I know with my situation, when he would lose in court, it's like he was determined to try again.
Yeah. Because they have to win.
Yes. And it continued and continued and continued. And at one point, he told his attorney, I believe, that he was going to have me arrested. Well, again, Lord, no jail, no, don't look good in orange. And in South Carolina, this amazed me. In South Carolina, you can go sign a warrant on somebody saying that they did XYZ. No proof. They will find this person and put them in jail. And then you have the court hearing or the process after that to prove whether or not this is true or not. And it just amazes me. So that happened to me, and it was so scary because I wouldn't take Jackson, my son, with me anywhere by myself because I was afraid I was going to get arrested because he had a warrant on me for something stupid, and that my son was going to get taken by the cops or, so I just wouldn't go anywhere with him by myself for a long time.
I mean, that's that dread. It's like, what did you do wrong? But to have to live like that.
Yes, definitely. You've already got the dread of being drugged back to court and the dread of the financial issues of it. And when you're the one raising the child, you don't have 20 hours a week to document everything. And you're more focused on being a parent. So it just gets complicated. But I swear that about drove me crazy. I would be in a drive-through and I'd see a cop and I'd just start shaking. And it's like PTSD. And like you said, it's harder to prove than the physical abuse.
Right. I mean, I can't, like, there's so many times we'll talk about being triggered by something. And I know for me, as well as a lot of our clients, if you get a message on a parenting app and just that little ding, it's like, oh my gosh, or opening up an email and seeing that person's name or their lawyer's name. Still to this day, when I open up my mailbox, I almost am like cringing, thinking, is there going to be another thing? Even though it's been 10 years, like, what is the next thing he's going to try?
Yes.
Because I think I told you, this has been a 10-year process for me, and it took years for justice to be served. And on the day that my ex finally was forced to pay orders that were 4 years old, his lawyer gave me papers that said they were suing us for defamation. Like, that, walked out of the courtroom. His lawyer followed me down in the elevator. I was representing myself, so I was by myself. And he's like, these are for you. And it was $1 million. And then they upped it to $4 million. And I just thought, can't you just leave me alone? Like, there's always something that I have to deal with. I had been a high school English teacher before my son was born. I loved teaching. I wanted to get back to teaching. And once the kids were both in college and everything else, I thought, oh, maybe I'll try teaching again. The world has changed, but let me try. And I got my resume together and I started sending out applications, and I had a couple of interviews, and then it was like, oh no, another court thing. Now I have to drop everything. And I realized I can't go back to teaching because I'm always in court. And so COVID was actually a blessing for me, because I'm glad I didn't take any of those jobs, because everybody learned how to use Zoom. And so now my educational background is on a global level, like yours.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it was an awful thing, the pandemic, but for us, it helped because I was still able to use my teaching degree and experience.
Yeah.
And I always say I got my education in the trenches of the family court system.
Yep. We got ours in the trenches of the sewage plant. Yeah.
It's funny. We actually were having a conversation recently, and I had made a comment that one of my clients has the exact same name and spelling that my ex-wife has. And every time they send me an email, when I see that first name, it's like, I don't even see the rest of the name. I just automatically go, oh God, what end do they want now? And it's,
Right.
I hadn't got an email from my ex in years.
What's funny is I've got several friends that their spouse's name is the same as my ex. I won't say their name. I do not like saying the name. I'll say, how's your husband doing? Something like that, because I just don't like the name. And we were talking, we used to be so bad about this. We would get the email, you feel the dread, you feel sick all of a sudden, and then you start reading the BS that they put in there. Well, then you respond angrily off and on for an hour or two. And then you go back and read it, because you got to make sure that it's court ready. If it goes to court, that you're not saying anything bad that's going to look bad on you. And we've both finally got to the point that we're like, you know what? No matter what an email says that they send or whatever they say, our response is going to be okay. Just okay. Now, my ex actually was pretty good at that himself, because he would put whatever, Lori. And that is a trigger for me when somebody says my name.
Oh,
I don't know. And it's because of that, whatever, Lori. And it's like, you know who you're talking to. You don't need to say my name. But when we quit doing that, it was like freedom. It took that power away that we had been giving them, where we felt like we had to constantly defend ourselves. Now, his wasn't half as bad as mine, or even a quarter as bad. But still, he got the same emails of, you're a crappy dad. And mine was more of, I'm taking you to court. You're a gold digging, blah, blah, blah. There was even a Facebook profile created by my ex about, Lori, the gold digging hoe. Yeah. So
that's the one I responded to. Hey, Gary.
But we don't realize how traumatic that is. But I will say that being in such a crappy relationship helped me to, number one, not end up in another one, to see those red flags that I didn't see the first time, or that I ignored the first time, we'll say. And it helped me appreciate David a whole lot more.
What she's trying to say is she had to have that to appreciate me.
Yeah, it's like you can't appreciate the sunshine until you experience the rain.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Yeah. But most people don't, they keep repeating the cycle though.
Yeah.
Most people don't learn from one toxic relationship.
And she is pretty hard-headed.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of that too was because of my son. I had actually, I had a list of what I would and would not accept in a relationship. So if I went on a date with somebody and something fell under that would not accept, peace out. Next, don't call me again. Like, for instance, Jackson was a baby. His dad and I split up while I was pregnant. And so Jackson was a baby, and there was this guy that I was talking to, and I told him, don't call me between 8 and 9. That's when I'm getting Jackson ready for bed, bath, all that happy stuff. He called me at 8:15 one night. I answered the phone. I said, hello. He goes, hey, what are you doing? I said, get ready to block you. Don't ever call me again. And I hung up. It was simple.
Because the boundary.
Yeah.
You push the boundary.
Yep.
Like, why?
Yes.
Already?
Yes. And then even when my ex and I split up, he would still call me every once in a while. And I had a list of things that he did to hurt me beside the phone. And this was when there was still a landline. And so anytime he would call, I would skim through that list to keep me from falling back into that trap with him. Because I was determined not to do it. I was determined to not have my child raised in an environment where he was exposed to that constantly.
Yeah.
And then you wonder, as having a kid, like, when the kid bucks up to them, what are they going to do? Are they going to do the same thing they did to me when I bucked up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kids in these situations have to learn how to advocate for themselves a lot younger.
Yeah.
And it's so hard because they're doing it just with someone that is supposed to love them unconditionally.
Exactly.
And they sense that there's something off.
Right.
But they have to, and it's so hard for the other parent because the other parent wants to often swoop in and save them and like make it stop. But there's so little, once you split, there's so little control you have over what happens in the other person's house. The only thing you can do is really work with your child to deal with it.
And pray.
Yeah. Do you see more of the problems happening in people's first relationships, first marriages, or second and subsequent marriages? Do you have any data on that?
We haven't taken data with our clients. It's mostly the first time they're going through this. Sometimes we have some that are in their second marriage. And I'm thinking of one client who's married to somebody and her husband has 2 exes, and we call them thing 1 and thing 2. Because there's like a couple kids from the different marriages, but most of the time it's their first marriages, at least with us. And that's why they're so terrified, because they're like, I've never done this before. We have another client, her ex, this was like his 3rd marriage, and now he's on to the 4th.
Yeah, he's professional. Yeah,
she says every one of his ex-wives gets a house. I don't know how he does it. They all get the house. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. How does he make that much money?
I don't know, but can I be number 6 or whatever? Get us a house, David.
Yeah, it's like a prize.
Yeah.
But generally, it's for in our community with our clients, it's their first most of the time.
So you said a lot of people continue the cycle. They get out of it, but then they get right back into it. Is that because, we all have our comfort zone, and I look at it as like a little house or like a turtle shell. Even if it's a bad experience, it's what we know.
Right.
So that's where our comfort level is. We know to expect these things. We know how to handle the drama, or we feel like we do. Huh?
It feels normal.
It feels normal. It feels...
We're addicted to the drama often. Our brain is used to drama all the time. So I don't know if you've heard this before, but I experienced this too when I met Chris. Like, I was so used to drama all the time that being with a healthier person felt kind of boring. And our clients would talk about it too, because it's like there's no excitement. Like, I'm used to fighting and wondering and worrying and all of that. So it feels weird. It feels unfamiliar.
Yes.
So a lot of people will say, I don't want to be with this person because they're too boring. Or you've heard of love at first sight, when it's like, oh my gosh, we met and I instantly knew, and there's all this chemistry, when we've learned that that's actually a fear response. When your body is suddenly coursing with adrenaline, it's that something in your brain knows this is familiar and I need to stay away. But instead, our romantic minds say, oh, no, I'm feeling all this intense emotion. It's probably because we're so connected. And so that's part of why we repeat the cycle, because we misinterpret a fear signal for something that's thinking, I need to get close to this person when our body is saying, get away.
Right. And we just feel it as a lot of emotion. So we feel like it's love.
Right. Right. But that's not love. That's fear.
Yeah.
And then the other thing with repeating the cycle is, I think that, and we did a course on this like years ago before we really niched down onto the legal part of it, when we were dealing with all kinds of things with toxic relationships in general. But when people tend to be very vulnerable at certain times in their lives, if they've moved, especially if they've just gone through a divorce, something significant has changed. And so when they date, that first time, abusive people are really good. They're usually very skilled. And part of one of the things that they're good at is getting other people to confide in them quickly and intimately, like right away. They want to kind of mine you for information that they end up using against you later. So let's say you go on a date with someone, and let's say heterosexual date. So you're with your date and he's asking you about your past, and you're just like, oh, I just got out of this terrible relationship and my husband cheated on me, whatever. You're basically giving that, if that's an abusive person, you're giving him information that he can use, intel, like, this woman put up with stuff like that. I could probably get away with this kind of stuff. Like, you're sharing these vulnerabilities, and you have to really be careful, because it's like you're doing the same thing again without realizing, like, I'm vulnerable. I shouldn't be telling a stranger all of these intimate things about me.
Yeah, you don't think about it.
Another thing is, people think, oh, trust. How can I tell if I could trust this new person? You can't tell. That person has to earn your trust. The only way you could tell is if over time they earn your trust and they prove it, right? It's not like a light switch, like someone's trustworthy or not. But people are so, they want to rush into something. And that's another signal of toxic relationships, when the person's rushing you to move in really quickly, or get married really quickly, or get even just exclusive really quickly. Like, what's the rush?
Right. I did an expectations challenge recently in our Nacho Kids Academy. And one of the unrealistic expectations is putting a timeline on relationships. That just made me think of that, of the person that's rushing that. It's not right. It's not the right relationship, I guess you would say, because they've got either unrealistic expectations, or they're doing it for the reasons you said.
Yeah, they want to trap you.
Yeah.
That's what you did to me.
Shh. Well, I do have a habit of hitting David. So I'm just going to say it. He'll say something stupid and I automatically do that. He usually has a shirt with a circle on it, so it's like a target. It's true. It's true.
Yeah.
But he deserves it. And it's like a love tap.
I just want things to be normal.
You're the 1 out of 7. Now let's talk about that.
She did say that 1 out of 2 people are abusive, so that would be you.
No, I'm not. One or two are abused.
No, I'm playing with my own statistic.
You are a statistic. But let's talk about that for a second. Men that are abused. People don't like to talk about that. It's even got a worse stigma to it than women being abused, because men are supposed to be men. And they're letting a woman abuse them?
Well, listen to the word you just used that a lot of people say, you're letting her do that. How are you letting that person do it? We interviewed a guy, he was 6'7". He's a veterinarian, and he was describing in graphic detail how his ex would get in his face and scream, and she'd be like, what are you going to do to me? Because he knew, like, if I hit her, I'm arrested and then some.
Yep.
And she kept saying, I'll slit your throat in your sleep. I'm going to slit your throat in your sleep. So she said it to him. And even a year after they split and she had moved out, he still felt like every time he'd go to bed at night, he would put furniture in front of the door. Because when she was out of the house already for a year, because he was so terrified that she would come back and slit his throat in his sleep. A 6'7" man.
He was a vet.
Many men that we talk to, they're like, I would never hit because what would ever happen to me? No one would ever believe
that
whatever.
She was abusive.
Or she hits me that I can't ever hit back. Because of the same thing. If I do anything, they're gonna look at me. Man,
Mhm.
woman, I'm much bigger. She's tiny. Like, no one would believe me.
Mm.
And there's so many people who think that men are the only abusers.
Right.
Some of these groups online, they're just like, all women tell the truth, which is absolutely false, and men are abusers.
When I look back at my parents' relationship, they fought constantly, constantly. They didn't get divorced till I was 30 something. They should have gotten divorced when I was like 3 months. They were miserable together. And like you said, there was no physical abuse, but there was a lot of, I would say, verbal abuse and mental abuse on both sides.
Mhm.
And that had an impact on us as kids
Of course.
because we would hear it constantly.
Yeah, like what the first relationship, with your ex was like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's talk about the legal side of things.
Okay.
All right. Scenario: separating from my ex, not necessarily married, but we're having to go to family court because we have a kid together.
Mhm.
And it's just a constant battle. The judge orders you to go to a therapist for co-parenting. You go, and the therapist testifies at the next hearing that I was there for the purpose of getting help and learning to co-parent, whereas the other person was only there because the court made them go. So you've got this person that you have a child with that you are going to have to deal with for the next 18 years that wishes you would get ran over by a train. And in fact has said, if I was driving down the highway and you were on fire, I would not even pee on you to put the fire out. How do you deal with something like that as far as not letting it consume your life?
Do you mean, okay, so there's the co-parenting counselor, that's like one part of it, or just the ex in general who wishes you were dead?
The co-parenting part, you can't co-parent with somebody that's not willing to.
That's right.
So we ended up parallel parenting,
Right.
which was the best thing that we could do.
Mhm.
But we see people all the time that will say, oh, we can teach you to co-parent. You can't if there's only one person that's willing to do it.
Right.
So from your standpoint, from the legal perspective, you've got this person that is constantly taking you back to court. You can't co-parent. There's nothing you can do to make them be a better person. From a legal standpoint, what's the best way to handle that when you go back to court? Because you can't talk to the judge and say, he's had me in here 25 times trying to reduce child support and has told me he's going to make sure I don't make a dime off him. That's why we're really here. He ends up using a different tactic. So the judge never, I guess, really sees what's going on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, that's like such a huge theme in our clients' lives. It's like, I want the judge to understand, I want the judge to validate me, and I want the judge to punish that other person. So, yeah, you can't co-parent, you can parallel parent. We say you're dealing with a counter parent, a person who does the opposite of what's good for your kids just to try to punish you and still get at you.
Oh, wait, maybe I was paralegal counter parenting.
So one of the things we do more than anything with people, whether they're in or out of the legal system, is we always have the idea that they're going to be back in court and they're going to need proper documentation. So we teach them something called strategic communication, where we say all communication has to be documented. Everything in writing, no more phone calls or conversations. You are writing to your ex, but you are really writing to that invisible audience in the future of a judge, a GAL, custody evaluator, mediator, child's therapist, attorney for the child, etc. So the goal is to start documenting that other parent's patterns of behavior over time and the impact it has on your child or on your relationship with your child. Because we all know the term parental alienation or abuse by proxy, where one of the things your ex does once they're not dealing with money in the courts is they try to turn your kid against you.
Yes.
So you're documenting patterns because they do one thing, nobody cares. But patterns matter. All lawyers that we interview, and from my own experience, that's the strongest case you can make. Look, Your Honor, look at what this other person is doing and the impact it has on our child, and teaching our clients about what's called custody factors or best interest factors, because those are the only things the court wants to hear about when it comes to custody issues, as well as something that we call alienation factors. Since we know our clients are going to be accused of parental alienation, because if the relationship fades or deteriorates between the child and the other parent, I mean, an abuser often, it becomes estranged from a child because they're neglectful or they're abusive, but they're never going to take accountability. So we always want our clients to understand what parental alienation means, how a parental alienation case is built, and for them to be very certain that they are not inadvertently doing things that could get them in trouble.
Right.
So, for example, one thing that people do that they think, oh, well, this makes sense, which it does in normal separations, is if my child is sick. So say my kid is really sick and it's the other parent's parenting time. Well, I don't want them to have to go out of bed. I don't want them to have to go because they're really sick. Now, any normal couple would be like, keep them. We'll deal with makeup time later. That's the end of it. But someone in our client's situation, their ex says, I don't care if the kid is sick. It's my time.
Yep.
And if you, as the parent who has the kid, if you say, no, they're going to stay home because they're sick, you could get accused of blocking contact and communication. You are effectively breaking orders. If it's that other person's parenting time, access time, you have to let the kid go. And a lawyer I interviewed said, if that kid is capable of getting out of bed and walking out the door, you have to let them go if the other parent is demanding that. Otherwise, they can start building a case against you about why do you think that you're the only parent can take care of a sick kid? Why do you act like you're the authority? Look at you making unilateral decisions, blah, blah, blah. So our clients often don't know things like that. Most people don't because they're just like, I'm being reasonable. No, not when you're dealing with one of those people. So you always have to be really, really conscious of understanding those alienation factors and being like, I can't do it. I know normal people would work it out, but my ex, I always have to make sure they have their rights because I don't want them to build a case against me or try to distract from real issues with stupid stuff like that. So yeah, anyway, so strategic communication is a huge part of what we do. It also turns hearsay into evidence, and it starts turning the power dynamic around in the relationship. So this is like long-term documentation for not if you go back to court, when you go back to court. And it's a very involved process. We always say it's an art form, and that's what we spend a lot of time coaching people on. And it's funny because we have a number of attorneys that are our own clients that hire us, and I'm always so honored. But teaching attorneys how to do strategic communication is funny because you're like, you'd think that they would know, but they don't, because everyone in these cases gets emotional, and just because you're rational in your job doesn't mean you're rational when it comes to your kids and what's going on in your own life.
Yes.
So it's really hard.
And one thing, I don't know if you tell people this, I feel sure you do, that when you are documenting this stuff, that you document facts. You don't just document the emotion, because you can document something, but you're so angry that it's not really a fact. It's
an interpretation.
Yeah.
Subjective.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yep.
And you have to be careful with that.
Well, also you have to be careful because when you present in court to a judge, if you present emotional interpretations, that's an insult to the judge because you're not allowing the judge to make his or her own conclusions.
Right.
So you need to just present the facts and present it in a way that makes the judge believe what you want to say. And that's, a very tactical process.
Yeah. And I learned the hard way. My first attorney, I actually met with when I was pregnant, and he was my attorney, but we both used him. And he came up with this agreement. It looked good. I never went through this before. Well, that was for when you're dealing with a rational person. And so my court order should have been 800 pages long, and it should have had no gray areas. And it should have been in black and white. And it also should have had a disclaimer that if there was no valid reason for me to be taken back to court, that he had to pay all my attorney's fees, and he had to pay some type of fee to me for,
wasting your time,
wasting my time, whatever. Because anything in there, how hard it is to enforce a court order, first of all. But some people, It's in a court order. They're like, well, I've got to do this.
95% of people follow the law.
Right. My ex was like, that don't apply to me. Or you're reading that wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a constant battle. And that attorney actually turned into a judge. And it's funny because I know that he's talked to other attorneys that I had to use, and he knows what I was trying to tell him in the beginning of this doesn't make sense. We need to make sure that it's this or whatever. But I also had another attorney, and you'll love this, that he had put something in the papers to where once I was given information about his job, that we had to go back to court rather than it just being resolved. Like, here's the information, use this for calculation for court child support. And I asked him, I said, why did you do that? He said, it's called job security. Because you had to go back to court. I had to take him as my attorney and go back to court to do this one thing. And we don't know any better when we're reading this stuff. But there was one time that I was so proud of myself. I was like patting myself on the back for days. My ex was filing bankruptcy. He owed attorney's fees. Guess what happens? If you file bankruptcy, those attorney's fees are included. They were my attorney's fees that he was supposed to pay. So if he would have got out of paying those, it's still my debt because it was still my name. I luckily called the attorney. I said, before you send those papers to be signed, you need to include that this money that he owes is an incident of support, because child support can't be dismissed in a bankruptcy. That's the only thing that saved me from having to pay that $12,000 he had to pay.
Wow. Well, what you talked about regarding the agreement, we often say, like, your agreement, your orders, your parenting plan, that's your Bible, that's your constitution. And you always need it, like a copy near you, at least our clients do. You always need to keep referring to it. And so my partner, Chris, writes high conflict parenting plans because we found that most lawyers use a template and they think we're dealing with reasonable. And that's why there is that gray language, which always, always, always ends up with our clients going back to court because the other side finds these little loopholes, like the word reasonable. It's never going to be reasonable. Or like if the parties shall come to an agreement.
Yep.
No, they're not going to come to an agreement. So then what are we going to do next? So we build in deadlines, consequences, enforcement language, like details and things that people don't even think about. Like some cultures, hair is really important. They get furious if one person unilaterally gets the child a haircut or does something with tattoos or piercings. Like those are things that should be put into a parenting plan. But that's something that a lawyer probably wouldn't think about. What about now with technology, or what age a child gets a phone? Social media, like these are things that have changed that I think a lot of attorneys are still using the same old basic parenting plans. And so it's really, really important for our clients to do what's called taking strategic oversight of their case and realizing you need to play a major role in your own case. Like you need to be on top of things. You can't just trust that your lawyer is your knight in shining armor and they're going to save your life and take care of everything. The only person, like everyone's going to go away, and the only people left will be you and your family dealing with the consequences.
Right.
The lawyer will be like, I didn't know. Oops. I messed up with one word. I'm really sorry. And that's it. You have no recourse.
Right.
So it's your responsibility to stay on top of things.
Yeah. It's a battle. I mean, for sure it's a battle. But I was fortunate not to have to go through all that like she did. So mine was a lot easier.
Yeah, mine was constant. It was constant. And I remember having a great day one day, coming home, opening the mailbox, and there's a bill from the attorney.
Oh, I know.
And it ruins your day. And in hindsight, I am really upset that I let those things affect me the way they did.
But how could you not?
Yeah.
How could you not?
Yeah.
Because, part of what we call legal abuse, and that's when I say, like, the official definition is when the other side is weaponizing the legal system to control harass, intimidate, coerce, and impoverish the other person. When you're living with that for years, I know every day that I was in the middle of it. Now things have settled down a lot. I would wake up and for a moment I would be fine. And then I would be so angry. And the three most common emotions for people living through this are rage, injustice, and despair. Because it's like, how can this be happening? How can this be allowed? At some point early on, I completely stopped caring about my ex-husband, but I was angry at the system for allowing him to get away with this. I was angry that the system that I turned to for relief was making things so much worse. And by not enforcing their own orders, it basically was emboldening him to do worse. He'd see, oh, I'm found in contempt several times and nothing happens to me. Then I just won't pay more bills. And then she'll have to take me back again and she'll have to spend more time and money and energy. So the systems that do not enforce orders just punish victims even further. And I've spoken to attorneys and they've said that one of the number one complaints they have about the justice system is the failure to enforce. And I've interviewed the head of the Judiciary Committee in Connecticut, which does not generally give deadlines and consequences. They'll put out an order and there's no deadline and there's no consequences. So if the person, let's say it's financial, they don't pay, you can't file for contempt because there's no deadline. And so when I asked the head of the Judiciary Committee, he said, well, that's because most people follow the law. I said, yeah, but what about the thousands or dozens of thousands of people who don't? The rest of us are the ones having to pay because we have to take time off from work. We have to hire a lawyer to go back again and again and again. And then the judges change and you have to start all over again with another judge. And these cases go on and on. That's also wasting taxpayer money. And when COVID hit, everything was completely backed up. It's still backed up. When are we ever going to catch up? I feel like if judges just enforced orders, like there were deadlines, consequences, and enforcement, and instead of punishing the victim, instead of trying to negotiate down and be like, oh, I know that person didn't pay. Let's just let them not pay penalties and interest and fees and let's just finish it quickly. No, it should go the opposite direction. Because that person didn't pay, they should pay more. They shouldn't pay less. Because what kind of message is that sending?
There's no repercussions.
Right. The repercussions are you can get away with it. You're being rewarded for failure to comply with court orders. And a system that keeps doing it is the opposite of justice. So that's stuff that made me so angry for all those years. But luckily, I was able to really impact several judges. I got to see the results of that impact. And like I said, now my case at the appellate level is published as legal precedent. So I was like, finally. So it felt really good.
Oh, I'm sure it did. I know when you and I talked before, we talked about the appellate court. And I was like, when my ex filed a thing with the appellate court, I didn't know what to do. I was scared I was going to lose my kid. Every time we went to court, I was scared I was going to lose my kid because you hear the horror stories. And there were times that through that whole appellate thing, it takes a long time. But I had to go get an attorney. And I told you he must have been dating somebody that had experience because he did it himself. And I know he's not stupid, but I just don't see him doing that himself. So that was a whole another ball game. What are you laughing at?
So you probably dated a paralegal.
Yeah.
Just for that reason.
Probably dating a paralegal. Looking for a paralegal.
Yeah.
But I think too, again, when something like that happens, there should have been some kind of, I don't know, penalty or something, because I did have to come out of pocket with money to get an attorney for this appellate thing.
And they're expensive. I mean, when I was told, appellate court is seriously, so like you better hire an attorney. It's like $10,000 to $15,000 retainer for someone to speak for 20 minutes. I said, absolutely not. I'm doing it myself. And luckily I did and won, but I was just like, no way. I am not paying for an attorney at this point because this is my only case. Like that's the power of being pro se, and not that everyone should go pro se ever. I went pro se post divorce. I would never recommend that someone go pro se during the initial divorce, because that's the foundation of the case and it really needs to be done properly. But post-judgment, it was like every time I even hired a lawyer to help me on a limited scope basis, they couldn't remember anything. They have all these other cases. I know my case better than anybody. I know all the details because it's my only case, because it's my life.
Right.
So the difficulty in being pro se is that emotional part.
Yep.
And that's why it's so important to separate. Like if you can get to the point where you know this is business, nobody cares, and just proceed like that, you'll do, I mean, with a lot of other help in other ways, you'll be okay. But so much of it is separating, like that emotional detachment from the case and realizing this is the system we're working in. Mm-hmm. It's not about like validation and punishment. It's about like, what can the court do? Deal with money, time. That's it. Get out of here.
Yeah. So how can people find you?
Super easy. If you just do a Google search for Been There, Got Out, you will find us. We're all over the place. Our website is beentheregotout.com. Our first book is called Been There, Got Out, Toxic Relationships, High Conflict Divorce. Yay! And How to Stay Sane Under Insane Circumstances is on Amazon. We're on Instagram. That seems to be my home base. And Lori, or both of you, I'll have you on in a couple of weeks. Let's see, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, LinkedIn. Yeah, we're all over the place.
Yeah.
So, MySpace.
MySpace.
Yeah, very, very easy to find. And our emails are lisa@beentheregotout.com or chris@beentheregotout.com. As of now, we are answering everything ourselves. We basically do pretty much everything ourselves. So when you read comments, like I am the one answering you. I am the one answering the direct messages. I am the one responding to emails.
Yeah. Well, one thing I do want to mention before we end this, you and Chris don't live together.
No, we're living apart together. Yep, 9 years. We keep talking about it, but I hope Chris can't hear me, but I think he has too much stuff and I don't think he's going to be able to get rid of it.
And you don't want him to bring a bunch of stuff to your house?
Too much stuff. And he's like such a clothes horse. He's got so many clothes. He loves his clothes and they're all organized, everything, shoes. He's a fashion bug.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Among other things.
Well, and you don't want to go through another divorce.
No.
Do you think that's why y'all aren't married?
We talk about it. Like part of me feels like I had a wedding with someone that I don't know if I ever really loved. And I certainly was not physically attracted to. And I was with him for nearly 18 years. And now I'm with someone that I really love and I'm attracted to. And we've been together 9 years. Like we should at least have a party. So we have been talking about it. But we have to research because it's scary. I mean, I've had so much with being in the court system, trying to extract myself, that it's almost like I don't want to jinx anything by getting remarried, you know?
Yeah, but you've been there and you can get out.
That's right. Yeah. And I mean, we have a business together, so we already have that marriage.
Yeah. And that's tough.
Yeah. I mean, we love it. It's fun.
Yeah.
And you guys love working together. We love it. It's such a creative thing to do together, right?
It is. It definitely is.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being a guest, and we'll have to have you back again soon.
For sure. It's been such a pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed our interview with Lisa and that you were able to take away something to help you in your situation. We hope you have a good day. And remember, life is good when you nacho.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Nacho Kids Podcast. Find us online at nachokids.com. Until next time, remember, life is good when you nacho.